All right, let's work on some compound inequality word problems. So example 4 says electrical devices should operate effectively within a specified temperature range. Outside the operating temperature range, the device may fail. Now notice below the picture, they always kind of hide it in this textbook, is the operating temperature range. So it wants us to write and solve a compound inequality that represents the possible operating temperatures of the smartphone. So basically, it's okay from 0 to 35 degrees. So that sounds like an and inequality to me. If you just picture, I'm going to do a real iffy number line here, not spaced out like I should. But it works from 0 to 35. Now, it includes 0, so let's shade it in, and it includes 35, and this is in Celsius. So it works from 0 to 35 degrees. Now, that's in Celsius, but it's set specifically in degrees Fahrenheit. So, let me erase a few things here. So what I'm going to need to do, it wants us to write an equation. So I'm going to essentially take where that x is right here, and I'm going to replace it with how we get Celsius into degrees Fahrenheit. So in your interactive student notebook, we had a page that had our common formulas. Mine is on page 10. And so it tells me how to get from Celsius to Fahrenheit. And that is to go from 5/9 times the Fahrenheit minus 32. All right, so the reason I could do this is because this x represented the degrees Celsius. And so C equals 5/9 F minus 32 is one of the formulas we have. And that's why I was able to swap it out instead of where the variable was in the middle. So that's the writing. Now we need to also solve because it wants it in Fahrenheit. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply times 9/5. Now remember, what we do to one side, we must do to the left, the middle, and the right. So the 5/9 and the 9/5 simplifies out. I still have 0 over here because 9/5 times 0 is just 0. In the middle, I still have F minus 32. And then 35 times 9/5 is 63. So now last but not least to solve, I can add 32, remember on the left side between the inequalities and on the right. So I get 32 is less than or equal to F is less than or equal to 63 plus 32 is 95. So basically your cell phone will work between 32 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Outside of that range, the device may fail. So B says, describe one situation in which the surrounding temperature could be below the operating range. Go ahead and select from the choices what is an example of where the temperature could be below 32 degrees and you were trying to use your cell phone. Okay, so what would be an example where the temperature could be above the 95 degree range and you were trying to use your cell phone? All right. So on example 5, it wants the same thing. It wants write a compound inequality that represents the temperature in Fahrenheit of the winter boots. So here's our range that we're okay with. So basically, these boots are good for temperatures between 40 and 15 degrees Celsius. But they want it in Fahrenheit. So instead of Celsius, we're going to plug in, we know that C equals 5/9 times F minus 32, and that's glued into my student notebook. All right, so that's the writing. Now let's solve. So how we get rid of 5/9 is we multiply by 9/5. But remember, it needs to be done, if you think of this inequality, draw the lines down, it needs to be done on the left, in between the two inequalities, and on the right. So I multiply by the reciprocal. So 9/5 times negative 40 is negative 72. Still have the same symbol. F minus 32 remains inside. 15 times 9/5 is 27. So now, to get F by itself, I need to add 32. So negative 72 plus 32 is negative 40. And 27 plus 32 is 59. So these boots are good to wear in temperatures from negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit to positive 59 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, let's look at example 6. It says to write and graph a compound inequality that represents the numbers that are not solutions of the inequality represented by the graph shown below. So basically, this graph down here shows you what are solutions. So if you're looking for what are not solutions, it's the opposite of this graph. So where it has an open circle above 15, the opposite would be a closed circle. Go ahead and draw that in. Where it has a closed circle above -3, the opposite would be an open circle. And if you look at the graph that was drawn there, the arrows point away, it's or, so the opposite would be and. So that, what I drew in yellow there, would be what's not solutions. I think it's easier just to draw it first, then write the compound inequality. So if you think about what this would be, this right here is x is greater than or equal to -15. And right here, this is x is less than -3. And since they connect, it's an and equality. So we're going to go ahead and write it in number line order. And just like we've learned before, put in our symbols. Let's try another one. So first, draw in the opposite of what's shown here. So the opposite would be a closed circle at -1 and an open circle at 6. And then what's shown is an and, so the opposite would be or. So what I drew in this pinkish color is what's not a solution, so the opposite. Now let's write an equation to go with the pinkish. This is x is less than or equal to -1. Less than or equal to because that's a closed circle and it's pointing to the left. Now it's an or equation because they're pointing opposite directions. And this is x is greater than 6 because it's an open circle and it points to the right. All right, so look at this one. If you drew what's not a solution, would it be an and or an or graph? All right, it would be and because it would be, right now it's or, so the opposite is coming together like this. What would the equation be that explains what this is when you write them together, like as a compound inequality? All right, it would be -4 is less than or equal to x is less than 2. And how I know that? Right here, if you picture a closed circle pointing this way, that's x is greater than or equal to -4. And an open circle pointing left is x is less than 2. Then I combine them in number line order. I'm careful with my symbols to make sure that they're still the same symbol and they open in the correct direction. Okay, so if you were to find the opposite of this, would it be an and or an or graph? All right, it would be or. So would it have an open or a closed circle at 3? All right, it would have an open circle at 3 and at 5 and it pointing opposite ways. What would the inequality be that you would write to represent the pink graph I drew above the number line that was given? All right, you'd have x is less than 3 or x is greater than 5.